Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. I'm Sandro Ferdinando. Let's take a look at your headlines for tonight.
Will the Trincomalee oil tank farm be sacrificed to India in a bid to resolve the East and West terminal conundrum? Removing travel restrictions imposed on the UK poses a severe risk, a warning from the GMOA. United States of America expresses displeasure over the government's indecisive stance on COVID-19 cremations. State Ministry of National Security, Disaster Management and Home Affairs handed over to Chamal Rajapaksa. Secretary of Karuna Amman's political party laments the government pays them scant regard.
First up in news here at home, the fire which broke out at the Kerawalapitiya waste disposal plant has not been doused yet. However, our correspondent noted that the emergency services personnel are currently in the process of dousing the fire.
The fire had erupted in an area of around 4 acres where polythene and plastic waste is discarded at the waste disposal plant in Kerawalapitiya. Our correspondent noted officers of the Colombo Fire and Rescue had arrived at the scene to douse the fire, along with the support of the Tri-Forces and police. Our correspondent added that the Air Force had conducted Bambi bucket operations to control the blaze, but windy conditions prevalent in the area had exacerbated the fire. Chairman of the Sri Lanka Land Development Corporation, retired Major General Veera De Soisa, arrived at the location to inspect the fire.
A fire has erupted in the area where plastic is discarded at the Kerawalapitiya waste disposal plant. We assume it happened due to dry weather. The fire is currently spreading in the area, but joint operations are underway to douse the fire. A strenuous effort will need to be expended, but it can be controlled.
Our Newsfirst correspondent Charlene Benedict, who is at the location, will share an update with you very soon. But until then, let's move on to more local news. The inoculation of the COVID Shield vaccine among parliamentarians continued today as well. Now, residents of areas that are at high risk of COVID-19 received the jab today as well.
A group including parliamentarians Patali Champika Ranawaka, Rauf Hakim, Geeta Kumarasinghe, Shan Vijayalal, Anura Predasha Yapa and Anuradha Jarath received the COVID-19 vaccine today. Parliamentarians who are yet to receive the vaccine have been allowed to obtain the jab from 8:30 AM to 12:30 PM on the 23rd, 24th and 25th of this month.
නෑ අපි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් සෞඛ්‍ය කරුණු වලට මිසක එක එක මිත්‍යාවන් පිළිබඳව විශ්වාස කරන්නේ නැහැ. දැන් ඒතකොට කතානායකතුමා නම් බීවා. කතානායකතුමා අපේ වැක්සින් එකක් ගාගත්තනේ. කතානායකතුමාගේ කාමරේදී තමයි ඒ වැඩේ සිද්ධ වුණේ. නමුත් එතුමා බීවද නැද්ද කියන එක ගැන නම් මට හරියට කියන්න පුළුවන් කමක් නැහැ. දැන් ඒ බීපු මන්ත්‍රීවරුනුත් ගහගෙන ඉන්නේ නේද දැන්? සමහරට එහෙම සිද්ධ වෙයි.
Meanwhile, 425 officers attached to the Attorney General's Department also obtained the COVID-19 vaccine today. This was following a request made by the Attorney General to the Director General of Health Services. The Health Ministry said that residents in the Colombo city limits were also inoculated with the COVID-19 vaccine. Around 450 individuals received the vaccine at the Thalgastanna temple in Meerigama as well.
දැන් ඔක්කොම කට්ටිය පැත්තකින් තියලා ඔන්න මන්ත්‍රී
They're going to give away Kite Islands, Hambantota Port and the West Container Terminal of the Colombo Port to India and China in return for this vaccine provided by them. Can't we allocate money for these vaccines? This is a significant issue with the country right now. Can't we reduce extra expenditure and purchase these vaccines? They are offering the vaccines to parliamentarians by neglecting vulnerable groups. There are many frontline workers in the health sector, armed forces, police and employees of urban councils who interact with the public. They are yet to receive the vaccine. School teachers interact with children as well, but they have asked parliamentarians to obtain the vaccine at the army hospital by continuing to ignore these vulnerable groups. As the JVP, we too want the vaccine, but we will obtain it only when they start vaccinating the general public of this country.
Meanwhile, several factions have warned that permitting British nationals to enter the country against a backdrop where a new variant that is rapidly spreading in South Africa is found in the UK is of high risk to Sri Lanka.
Thinking that we have curbed the situation and there is no problem at present will pose a bigger threat to us in the future. Medical professionals in Europe have pointed out that the new variant found in the United Kingdom is more severe than we ought to think. Are we aware of these things? If this new variant enters our country, our vaccine administrating procedure could also be subject to change.
Covishield එන්නතට ගැලපෙන්නේ නැති දකුණු අප්‍රිකානු ප්‍රභේදය
At a time when a new variant is spreading in the UK that is immune to the Covishield vaccine, ironically enough, Sri Lanka takes steps to lift the travel restrictions that were imposed on tourists coming from UK. Was this decision taken based on the recommendations of the epidemiology unit of the Ministry of Health?
මේ තීරණ සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශයේ වසංගත රෝග අංශයේ නිර්දේශ අනුවද සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ.
Sri Lanka recorded 258 new COVID-19 infections today. Accordingly, the total number of cases reported due to the virus in the country stands at 78,164. Meanwhile, 13 deaths were reported due to COVID-19 yesterday, making it the highest single-day death toll due to the virus in the country. The deceased have been identified as residents of Nuwara, Agarapatana, Paliagoda, Bombuwala, Kalutara, Naboda, Maggona, Kalutara North, Gampola, Panadura, Vauda and Nugegoda.
We have more news in store for you, but let's quickly go for a commercial break.
Struggling to find reliable plumbers, electricians, gardeners and other service providers? Bellboys got you covered.
Welcome back. Continuing in more local news, the Hondahita Buddha Tower constructed in Tisamarama was declared open by Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. Located along the Pannegamu Road in Polgahawela, Tisamarama is 127 feet in height. Meanwhile, yesterday Minister Udayagamanpila said that steps will be taken to reacquire the Trincomalee oil tank farm to Sri Lanka. But today, the minister noted that the oil tank farm will be managed through a joint venture in which Sri Lanka will hold a majority stake.
By allowing the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation to hold a majority stake in managing the oil tank farm, it will be subjected to an audit by the Auditor General, while the directors can be summoned and questioned by the Committee on Public Enterprises. Questions can be raised on this matter from the subject minister in Parliament as well. During the period in which the oil tank farm would be operated with the agreement of the relevant shareholders, we will hold discussions to decide how many storage tanks can be reacquired by the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation. We have been able to finalize the first round of discussions based on this preliminary objective.
What is the history behind the Trincomalee oil tank farm? During the Second World War, the British had constructed 102 tanks between 1924 and 1930 near the Trincomalee harbour. The Trincomalee harbour is one of the world's natural harbours that is of strategic importance. The main intention of the British was to develop the Trincomalee harbour into a commercial hub targeting eastern countries. The oil tank farm comprises of two sections that include 83 tanks in the upper tank farm and 17 tanks in the lower tank farm. The Indian Oil Corporation currently manages 15 storage tanks at the facility. This is in line with an agreement signed in 2003 by the United National Party government at that time to lease out the oil tank farm to the Indian Oil Corporation for 35 years.
The oil tank farm was leased out for 35 years based on the 2003 agreement. This would end in 2035. When Sandima Veerakkodi was a minister in 2017, he submitted a cabinet proposal on this, but it was suspended. Minister Arjuna submitted a proposal highlighting that 16 tanks are with the Lanka Indian Oil Corporation and called for 10 tanks in the upper farm to be vested with the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation while developing the remaining 74 tanks as a joint venture. When discussions were being held on this matter, the Sri Lanka Nidhas Sevaka Sangama asked for 20 tanks by citing that 10 are insufficient. They had agreed to table a proposal in line with these requests. The court has ordered that a new agreement cannot be signed until the conclusion of the 35-year lease period. But the minister is saying that they had made this decision following agreements reached with trade unions. I spoke to all trade unions this morning. They clearly said that they have not agreed to any of the conditions set out by the minister. They insisted that they have not entered into a joint venture. Therefore, let me reveal the truth. A board paper had been put forward at the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation for a Petroleum South-East Corporation hub. The proposal aims at purchasing a 100-acre area of the Hambantota port that is owned by a Chinese firm on lease and to construct 24 storage tanks under 3 phases with a capacity of 10,000 metric tons to provide oil to the north, east, Anuradhapura and Kurunegala. The cost of this project has been estimated at 2.25 billion. While the minister is saying that the oil tank given in 2003 would be reacquired, discussions are being held to set up a Petroleum South-East Corporation hub. This talk about constructing 23 tanks and distributing fuel from it as well. If that is the case, then why are they acquiring 84 tanks? We will not receive the entire oil tank farm.
Last evening we were notified that there are 3 entities. There is suspicion among employees and the public on whether the ulterior objective of this is to allow foreign forces to enter the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation.
The Indian High Commission in Colombo for a second day today issued a press release regarding the Trincomalee oil tank farms. The Indian High Commission said that the two governments have consulted each other to explore mutually acceptable modalities for jointly developing and operating the Trinco oil tank farms in accordance with the existing bilateral understandings, including the MOU of 2017. The High Commission adds that India looks forward to formal discussions on the matter and expeditious implementation of their outcome to mutual benefit.
This is not the case. References are being made to an entity that belongs to the Indian Oil Corporation. It had been neglected all these years. If we join hands with India, it would be beneficial to the country's economy. Today, we cannot make decisions that would appease everyone. The President and the Prime Minister will make the relevant decision. They could have reacquired it in 2011. It was the current government that was in power at that time as well, but they didn't do that. Instead of focusing on 13 storage tanks, they are trying to embark on a joint venture with India to develop the entire oil tank farm.
Although the oil tank farm, that is a valuable national resource near the Trincomalee harbour, was leased out in 2003, it was not properly vested with the other entity through the agreement. What are they doing now? They are planning to embark on a joint venture to develop the oil tank farm with the assistance of the Indian Oil Corporation. It is our national resource in Trincomalee. On Monday, Mahinda Rajapaksa has submitted a proposal to Cabinet seeking to fast-track investments. What does that mean? That would mean that the central bank does not have to inquire into the source of funding. The Central Environmental Authority does not have to inquire into any environmental impact. There is no need to examine whether lands have been acquired in line with the country's laws as well. Construction activities could be carried out without the approval of the Pradesh Sabha or the Urban Council. Who is on this committee? Finance Secretary S.R. Artigala, the Secretary of the Urban Development Ministry, Vasantha Pereira, the Secretary of the Ministry of Power, Maya Pathurana of the Labour Ministry, the Deputy Secretary of the Treasury Ratnayaka, Sanjaya Mohattala and Visaka Kamarasekara. The committee has been asked to fast-track investments. They are planning to give away national assets to multinational companies based on the decision of a single committee. But 15 months ago, they said that their leaders would protect national assets. Today, their leaders are fast-tracking the sale of these assets.
Special report.
While various views continue to be expressed on the Trincomalee oil tank farm, a discourse is growing over 3 Chinese power projects on 3 islands in the northern seas of Sri Lanka. A team of Newsfirst reporters who visited the Delft and Nainathu islands to inquire into the projects reached the Analethu island today. A renewable energy project is due to take place on Analethu island with the involvement of a Chinese firm. That is due to the increased presence of natural resources and arable lands compared to other islands. For a prolonged period of time, Analethu Island has been well known for its paddy, chili and tobacco cultivations. The island is home to 650 families comprising more than 2,000 individuals.
This is the beach of the Analethu Island, one of the islands in the chain of islands in the Jaffna Peninsula. Now, the locals told us that the proposed site for the solar and wind power plant, which is to be awarded to a Chinese company, is located roughly 100 to 200 meters away from this coastline. Now, we are going to venture into this shrubbery area along the coast in order to locate the exact spot of this proposed site.
Our reporters identified the location on the coast of Analethu Island that has been allocated for the proposed power project. Residents on the island who have been affected by the encroachment of Indian fishermen complain that they would be struck by a double whammy due to the involvement of China.
We are fishermen, Indian fish in our waters. We are aware of the tussle between India and China. Therefore, if the project is given to China, we will have to face several problems. Our natural resources would be affected. The island is our home. It is important to engage in activities that are beneficial to our country.
Co-cabinet spokesperson Udega Mampila said that the tender for the project has been awarded to the Chinese company following an open bidding process.
The project is taking place on an island in the northern region using funds provided by the Asian Development Bank. The Chinese company that tabled an acceptable bid was awarded the tender.
During a media briefing in Jaffna today, EPRLF leader Suresh Premachandran said he has received reliable information stating that moves are underway to commence coconut cultivations across hundreds of acres of lands in the Palei area in Kilnochi.
We now have an update ready from Shalan Benedict, who is at the Keravalapitiya waste disposal plant following a fire which broke out earlier. But more on that will come right after this commercial break. Stay tuned.
Struggling to find reliable plumbers, electricians, gardeners and other service providers? Bellboys got you covered.
Let's now cross over to Shalan Benedict for an update from the Keravalapitiya waste disposal plant. Good evening, Shalan.
Thank you, Sadhuru. I am coming to you live from the Keravalapitiya garbage disposal facility where a fire erupted at the garbage disposal site at about 3 this evening. Now, fire brigades and firefighters have been battling the fire since then, and the fire is still raging on, as you can see behind me. When we initially arrived at this location at about 6 this evening, there was a fire on this side of the garbage dump as well, but however, the firefighters have managed to bring that fire under control. However, still, as you can see quite clearly behind me, the fire is raging on. There is some smoke that is being emitted, a huge amount of smoke emitted from this fire, and it has engulfed this general area surrounding the Keravalapitiya garbage disposal facility. Fire trucks are here from the Colombo Municipal Council as well in a bid to douse the fire. Security has been tightened in this general area, of course, which is a high security zone. However, the latest update being that authorities are still grappling to douse the fire. There are a number of fire trucks on standby outside as well, but the fire is still raging on. Continue to stay tuned to Newsfirst. We will bring you the latest update from the fire that is raging here at the Keravalapitiya garbage disposal facility. Reporting for the Newsfirst team, I'm Shalan Benedict.
Thank you, Shalan, for that very comprehensive update. Moving on, views were expressed today in Vaunia regarding the support extended by the Tamil United Freedom Front towards the government in the last presidential election.
இந்த மக்களுக்கு கொடுத்த வாக்குறுதியின்படி பல விடயங்களை செய்ய முடியாத இயலாத
The government has failed to fulfill the promises they have made to the people. We are disappointed of the fact that the parliamentarians who contested from the flower bud have no concern towards the members of our party. We are of the suspicion whether this government is taking harmful decisions not only against the Tamil community of this country but against the citizenry of this country. Our party had an agreement with the SLPP and backed Gotabaya Rajapaksa in the presidential election, but we did not receive anything in return for our support. We have our doubt whether Gotabaya Rajapaksa had forgotten his duty. Mahinda Rajapaksa gave the post to our leader Karuna Amman, but he cannot do politics being bound by that post.
யாது அரசின் கொள்கை திட்டங்களை முன்னெடுப்பவராக அங்கே கடமையாற்றிக் கொண்டிருக்கிறார்.
Minister of Environment Mahinda Amaravira unveiled the plan of obtaining the building material essential for the development activities of the country in the coming 4 years.
We are in need of 495 million cubic meters of granite, 125 million cubic meters of sand and 685 million cubic meters of soil and gravel for the development activities between the period of 2021 and 2025. We can only utilize half of this amount from the material we have in the country at present. We expect to identify the necessary resources for this endeavor and get them down here in a proper manner that would not harm the environment. Also, we have to take steps to reduce the time spent on obtaining sand and other permits. We will take steps to introduce an easy method to obtain the permits.
වලට අවශ්‍ය නිර්දේශ ලබා ගන්නත් ඒ අයට ලබා දෙන්නත් කටයුතු කරන
Newsfirst came across several farmers who had not reaped expected harvests today from a number of areas in the island. Potato farmers in Valimada have been rendered helpless as a result of a disease plaguing their cultivations. The farmers obtained seeds from the Yala season through the harvest obtained in the Maha season. Farmers sow their fields with the innocent hope of obtaining seeds and earning an income. However, the cultivations fostered by farmers at the expense of their personal belongings have not been destroyed.
පුවකට අපි දැන් ලස්ස ගානක් වියදම් කළා විතර අවසාන මොහොතේ තමයි මේ වාගේ රෝගයක් මේ හිටු මැරියුමක් අල්ලලා තියෙන්නේ. මේ සැරේ බීජෙට තියාගන්න වෙන්නේ නැහැ මිනිසුන්ට වහ බොන්න වෙලා තියෙන්නේ සර් මේ විදියට අලවතු තිබ්බම.
ඉතින් ඒ ගාන වියදම් කළා අද ජීවත් වෙන්න ක්‍රමයක්වත් නැහැ. මේ බලන්නකො මේවා වත විනාශ වෙලා තියෙන විදිය.
කිලෝ එක බෙහෙත් පැකට් රුපියල් 4000ක් විතර වෙනවා. එහෙම නැති වුණා නම් මේ ඊයේ පෙරේදා වහපු වැස්සට අපිට අලවතු බේර ගන්න බෑ. ඒ බේරගත්තත් වැඩක් නැහැ. මේ දැන් බලනකොට සම්පූර්ණ මැරිලා තියෙන්නේ.
Farmers in Polonnaruwa who cultivated in under the Maha season have also been left helpless as a result of nearly 75% of their harvest being destroyed. They lament the requirement of having to hand over 1,000 kilos for each hectare cultivated has caused them more despair.
මේ මොහොත වෙනකොටත් සෑම කරල් 3කට එක් කරලක් බොල් කරලක් බවට පත් වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ 130කින් අනිවාර්යෙන් 140කින් පස්සෙන් අඩු වෙන එක මේ කන්නේ වළක්වන්නම බෑ.
සන ලොකු බලපෑමක් වෙලා තියෙනවා. මේ වෙනකොට අක්‍රයකට සාමාන්‍ය වීබුසල් 75න් එහාට යන්න බෑ. හැබැයි අපේ 75න් එහාට යනකොට යන්න බැරි වෙනකොට ගොවියට ආණ්ඩුවට තියා සාමාන්‍ය තමන්ගේ වියදමත් දවර් කර මේ කවර් කරන වී ටික දෙන්න විදියක් නැහැ.
කුඹරක් කැපුවාන් පස්සේ දැන් තියෙන්නේ මේ අක්කර දෙකේ කුඹරක් කැපුවාන් පස්සේ වීමිටි 42යි 45යි ඒ වගේ තත්යකට. මේ කුඹරකින් ඊට ඉස්සෙල්ලා සාමාන්‍ය වීමිටි 100 පෑගුවා.
Most of the cultivations were destroyed as a result of the torrential rains which occurred in the Polonnaruwa district. Farmers lament that they cannot reap a harvest which is adequate to even fulfilling their needs. However, they remain hopeful of a competent authority intervening and solving their issues for them. Meanwhile, leader of Samagi Janabala Vega Sajith Premadasa and leaders of parties that are in coalition with the Samagi Janabala Vega convened a media briefing at the opposition leader's office today.
Apart from the Presidential Commission of Inquiry into Political Victimization, another special Presidential Commission has been appointed now. Why is this government trying to hide the findings of the first commission? We would like to tell the government to table the report of the commission at the next parliamentary session, and we need an extensive debate on that. If these things are of utmost importance, why isn't the government making these public? Also, I would like to say that all of us should unite to defeat this endeavor to silence our political leaders in a lawful, constitutional and in a democratic manner. This government is afraid to launch a democratic election campaign with our political leaders. That is why they are going to strip us of our rights.
ඒ බියට තමයි මේ සීළු දෙනාගේ අයිතීන් අහෝසි කිරීමේ ප්‍රයත්නයක නිරත වෙලා සිටින්නේ.
දැනට නිල නොවන වාර්තාව.
As of now, an unofficial report has come out, but the government has not said that it's wrong. What we can see is that they have taken steps barring us from taking any legal action. That is the legal side. When it comes to politics, the government is attacking the people who criticize the government from within the government and trying to silence the people who can strongly stand against the government. This special presidential commission can abolish public rights for 7 years under Article 81 of the Constitution. The commission can create a situation where you cannot cast your franchise, neither seek the mandate of the people. We will not bow down before these things. We will take prompt action against this undemocratic rule.
අපි මේවට දන නමන්නේ. අපි අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම මේ ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍ර විරෝධී පාලනයට එරෙහිව කටයුතු කරනවා.
Meanwhile, the 46th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council will commence on the 22nd of this month. In line with the forthcoming session, Minister of Public Security retired Rear Admiral Sarath Weerasekara expressed his views on the report presented by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, on Sri Lanka.
We heard that the core group will bring forth a proposal. The core group is comprised of the United Kingdom, Canada, Germany and Macedonia. That proposal will be divided into two by the UNHRC. Most people are against it. So what we are trying to tell them is that we will carry out internal affairs and that we do not need a resolution. We would like to clearly say that we don't like them poking fingers into our internal national matters.
ප්‍රශ්න තියෙනවා අපි විසඳ ගන්නම් ඒ අභ්‍යන්තර වැඩවලට ඇඟිලි ගහන්න එපා කියන එක තමයි අපි ඊටාම පැහැදිලිව කියන්නේ.
Attorney at law Hijaz Hizbullah, who was detained by the Criminal Investigations Department for several months on a detention order, was produced before the 4th Magistrates Court today. Attorney at law Hizbullah, who was produced before court today on the instructions given by the Attorney General to the IGP yesterday, was remanded till the 3rd of next month. He was arrested on charges of aiding and abetting and having close links to the terrorists involved in the April 21st attacks. Meanwhile, the principal of the Manathavilluwa Madrasa School, Mohammad Shakir, who was detained along with Hijaz Hizbullah, was also remanded till the 3rd of March after being produced before court today.
US Ambassador to Sri Lanka Elena B. Tepliz has expressed disappointment in witnessing that the Sri Lankan government and the Prime Minister are backing away from ending the mandatory cremation policy on individuals who die of COVID-19. In a tweet published today, the ambassador said that the quote-unquote people, including loved ones recently passed, deserve more respect for their rights from a democratic government.
The Central Bank of Sri Lanka says it expects a current account surplus for 2021.
Quoting the Director of Economic Research at the Central Bank, the Mirror Business newspaper said the country could end up with a current account surplus in its external account in 2021, following the deficit in the current account projected for 2020 much narrower than in the recent years despite the headwinds.
This year we are expecting a current account deficit, a lower current account deficit of about $1 billion compared to 1.8 billion in 2019 and 2.8 billion in 2018. When I discuss with my colleagues, what they say is that, so I asked them to make some scenario analysis. What would happen if we can continue the current import compression in 2021 and beyond? They say that there will be a current account surplus, even if you adjust the export-imports numbers by a little bit. What would happen if the export performance is better than what we expect now? They say that there will be a current account surplus. What would happen if tourism rebounds early? They say that there will be a current account surplus. And what would happen if workers' remittances are slightly higher than what we are getting at the moment? They say there will be a current account surplus. But still, year after year, in the past, we have seen current account deficits, and that has affected the Sri Lankan economy severely.
However, economic analysis held a different view.
We have a series of debt payments to be done this year until about 2025. So only looking at the current account surplus or the deficit would not be the right way of looking at our overall economic condition. At the same time, we know our imports have been restricted to a certain extent. Imports and exports are the two sides of the same coin. So when you restrict imports to an extent, it will also have an impact on exports at the same time. And according to the central bank data itself, about 80% of our imports are capital goods and intermediary goods. So in that sense, just interpreting the current account deficit would not give a clear picture.
We see that in 2020, the current account benefited because the price of fuel, barrel of Brent oil, was averaged about $35, as opposed to probably in the next year, it will average about $64, $65. So there was a saving on fuel, maybe about $1.3 billion in 2020. And then in capital expenditures, about $1 billion. Then there was a saving in intermediate goods of about $1 billion. And these were mainly because there was very little economic activity. And then you had motor vehicles and TVs and all, also about $1 billion saving. So there was about a $4 billion saving. That's what benefited the current account. But now in 2021, you are not going to have that, because if there is even a partial economic growth, there will be the imports of some intermediate goods. Some capital goods will have to come into the country. And even if we have a full ban on consumption vehicles, motor vehicles, TVs and so forth, and then the cost of fuel will go up, which means then we'll have to pay more for our imports. So I would assume, right, that there could be an increase actually when you add those things of $2 to $3 billion. Therefore, this idea that there will be a current account surplus, I think is not sustainable.
2 drones that can be used for aerial surveillance in the event of any threat to national security were handed over to the Sri Lankan Air Force today. This was during an event at the Air Force camp in Colombo.
The drones are to be used by the Sri Lanka Air Force to monitor possible breeding grounds for dengue mosquitoes, to spray mosquito repellent and to strengthen national security. The equipment was handed over by Western Province Governor, Marshal of the Air Force Roshan Gunathilaka, to Air Force Commander Air Marshal Sudarshana Patirana. We have issued instructions to utilize this equipment in the event of any threat to national security. We will carry out aerial surveillance on deforestation, sand mining and any other forms of environmental destruction. We would then dispatch a special team and take steps to arrest the relevant suspects.
Minister Chaman Rajapaksa has been appointed as the State Minister of National Security and Disaster Management and State Minister of Home Affairs. He was sworn in before President Gotabaya Rajapaksa at the Presidential Secretariat this evening. The PMD added that the appointment came after the portfolio of State Ministry of National Security, Home Affairs and Disaster Management was divided into 2 separate state ministries, State Ministry of National Security and Disaster Management and State Ministry of Home Affairs. And with that, wrap up news for tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. Do take care and good night.